everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's guest is Kate, but she is probably better known as the Phunky Witch around the Fish Twitter community. For today's episode, Kate chose a stunning psychedelic segment from Fish's visit to the Sphere in Las Vegas, themed from the bottom into Split Open and Melt from April 19th, 2024. Even though the band's 4-show stand at the Sphere happened fairly recently, I just knew it would be a matter of time before a guest chose to talk about the music from that run. From any perspective, the enormity of the Sphere seems to be the perfect venue to discuss attendance bias. In other words, is it possible to convey the experience of being at the Sphere in words? Or does one have to be in attendance in order to understand what it's like? Luckily, Katie chose a segment of the show where we can hear the musical magic, and she does a great job explaining why it was so special to be there. So let's join Kate to talk about red-eye flights, the Nassau Coliseum, and black eyes as we discuss Theme from the Bottom into Split Open and Melt from April 19th, 2024 at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Katie, the Phunky Witch, thank you so much for coming to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad I can finally get to do this. Finally found some time to. Really happy to be here. Really excited to talk to you about this stuff.
I'm excited to talk to you about this stuff. And first and foremost, for everyone listening, today, Katie chose a specific jam. She chose Theme from the Bottom into Split Open and Melt, which I believe was at the end of the first set on April 19th, 2024 at, I still call it The Sphere, although I know at Madison Square Garden Inc. likes to just call it Sphere. What about you? Is it the Sphere?
Stupid. It's so stupid. It's the Sphere. It sounds stupid. What do you say? Oh yeah, I went to Sphere. Like you sound like you can't speak English. It's the Sphere. I'm gonna call it the Sphere throughout the show. I apologize in advance if you have a problem. Take it up with me.
Yeah, if James Dolan is listening, you got to take a clue from both of us. So, Theme from the Bottom into Split Open and Melt from April 19th, 2024 at The Sphere in Las Vegas, Nevada. So if you're a member of the Fish Twitter community, no doubt you've come across Katie's username or some of her tweets as the Phunky Witch, but we know a lot about her online persona. But let's hear a little bit about who she is as a Fish fan as part of the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So Katie, when was your first Fish show and what do you remember from it?
So my first Fish show was 12/29/2017. It was at MSG, and I was in college. I remember that the night before we went way too hard in college, and we woke up and we almost didn't go because we were so hungover. But then I remember getting dragged to the LIRR, which is the railroad here. The best way to get to the MSG, the worst way to be sober at a show because you drink on the freaking train. It's a mess. It's so fun. But I remember I got tall boys for the train. I dropped one on the platform. It sprung open and it started spreading everywhere. So as any 20-year-old does, I picked it up and I shotgunned the tall boy on the platform and became way too drunk for my first Fish show. But we get there. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned yet that night before I got so drunk that I fell and had a black eye. So I had a shiner at my first Fish show as Katie with a black eye. And keep in mind that I'm a noob. I don't know anything about Fish yet. And I'm walking up and everyone's like, oh, it's your first show. What's your name? And I'm saying Katie. And they're going, holy shit, black-eyed Katie. And I'm saying, these guys are really fucking weird. I don't know what they're talking about. But looking back now, I'd probably freak out if some little girl came up to me with a black eye saying, hey, I'm Katie. It's my first show, black-eyed Katie. So I get it now. But at the time, I was like, everyone's fucking weird here, man. Like, this is a cult.
Did they play the moment dance at that show?
I don't know if it was that one. It's definitely that run.
Okay.
It was definitely that run. But it wasn't black-eyed Katie. I know they opened the Cavern. That was the first Fish show, first song that I heard live. And everyone was like, this is so good for your first show. And I'm drunk from the tall boy, so I don't know what's going on. But they did that. There was a 555 in there, Martian Monster. There was a Ghost, I think. Then we got Numberlined. I remember this because everyone moaned and groaned. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? What's getting Numberlined mean? And I still stand by it that backwards down the number line fucks so hard. So I don't know why everyone's saying you got number lined. I remember that. And I remember waking up the next morning and saying, I need to go tonight. I need to go tonight. I need to go for the rest of this run. And I was asking everyone around me, how do we get tickets? What do we do? Because I didn't know there was a whole community out there. And they're like, don't worry, just put your finger up outside. And sure as shit, I go in the next night, do this, do put finger up in the air, and got a ticket. And I've seldom missed an MSG show ever since. I think half of the shows that I've seen live have been at MSG. It's been
wow.
great.
Yeah, more than half of mine
Yeah.
have certainly been at Madison Square Garden. Did you make it to New Year's Eve? I believe that was the Say It To Me Santos year.
Yes, it was. And yes, I did. I made it to almost every single run since. I mean, at least 3 of the 4 of every single run since. And it's just the best place to see fish. It really is.
Well, backing up a little bit, if that was your first show, how did you end up there? How did you first become aware of fish? How'd you get into the band?
Okay. So actually, I feel like this sentence is like the last thing that you would expect someone to say to this question. But I got into fish because I was president of my sorority. So, believe it or not, I was able to control what t-shirts we had. So I made Grateful Dead t-shirts for the sorority because I'm a deadhead. I was already a deadhead in college. And this is how Name 3 Songs, the whole, oh, can you even name 3 songs started too. Someone came up to me and asked me if I knew what the fuck was on my shirt. I was like, yeah, it's the Grateful Dead, Kick Rocks. And he goes, have you heard about fish? And I've never heard about fish before. I mean, I've heard of them, but never listened. And I asked the question that fish fans have a very hard time with, which is show me one song. So he showed me it was 12/31/93 Hood.
Classic.
And I fell in love. And I said, hey, can you play that again? And he goes, there's like hundreds of other versions. And I said, no, play that one again, that exact one. That was sick. And I fell in love with it. And that was the end of that. And then that's where Name 3 Songs started because there was like 40 girls out there in Grateful Dead t-shirts that had no idea what the hell they were wearing.
Well, I'm glad you cut against that stereotype of Name 3 songs, because I'll tell you, as a middle school teacher, and I'm sure you've noticed this, that in the mall, pretty much in like the Gap or whatever clothing store, now Grateful Dead iconography is super duper popular. And a lot of my students will wear Grateful Dead Steely shirts and the Dancing Bears. And then I've learned not to say it anymore, but I've asked them, oh, cool. Like, do you like them? They have no idea what I'm talking about. So thank you for reversing that trend and cutting against that stereotype, because all I want to do at work is connect with my students. And it's like, oh, they're all Grateful Dead fans, but alas, they're not. Except the odd parent out. I could always tell who that is.
Yeah, I mean it's everywhere now. Forever 21 has them. It's just it's all over the place. And my favorite is when someone was wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt at a bar I was at. I asked them about I was like, oh, you like Led Zeppelin? Like, let's talk about it. And the guy goes, yeah, I love him. He's great. So yeah, I mean it's a fun little bit that we do, but we're working on it.
Well, if MSG in 2017 was your first show, what was your most recent Fish show? And what did you think of it?
My most recent was the last night of the Sphere, whatever we're calling it. It was 4/21/24 at the Sphere. That was the one with the ghost with the robots. That was sick. It was so awesome. There was the Divided Sky in there. That was also great. There was a Character Zero. Oh, and then the Down with Disease, that insane Down with Disease. If you haven't listened to any of the Sphere shows, just listen to that. Like, start there. That Down with Disease is so freaking awesome. I mean, the Sphere in general was so awesome, but that was my last one. And then I also learned to Piper was in that too, and I have a Piper tattoo. So I love Piper. I actually learned to like Ether Edge because of that show. Believe it or not, as much as that song gets hated on, it was really, really fun. And I remember I left during Encore because I had to make a red-eye flight at 2 a.m. And I took the red-eye straight back to New York, walked out of JFK into my car, and drove straight from JFK that morning to work. And I worked a 16-hour shift.
I don't
Yeah.
want to tell my age, but oh man, to be young again. I used to do stuff like that, not flying. I drove from Cincinnati back to college in Buffalo overnight to make my classes in the morning. But I've never
Hmm.
done a red eye flight from the West Coast back east to do work. I've reached a point in my life where it's just like I know when to pick my spots, but I don't know, man. That's a little much for me.
It's
So kudos to
dedication.
you.
And
It's
then, I mean,
dedication, but it's also it's self-sacrifice.
it's a lot. I know. I was like either gonna miss the whole first day, the first night, and then not have to miss the last encore, or be able to make the first night and then miss the encore. And I think I made the right decision. I mean, it's 100% worth it. I was tired as hell, but it's you'll never remember how tired you were at work, but you'll always remember the awesome shit that you did the night before. So that's what I was doing. And then before that was Mexico. So
Yeah. Well, put that on
you
a
know,
plaque and hang it right in front of your desk, right? You'll never
yeah,
remember how tired you were,
yeah,
but you'll remember how much fun you had.
exactly.
So I know
Yeah,
by
I
your
mean, and
social
that's
media feed that you're a huge Deadhead. And if you could travel back in time and see the Grateful Dead any year of their whole career from 65 to 95, I'm going to cut it off there. Which year would you pick and why?
see, that's a really hard question.
It's the lightning
But I
round. We don't
mean,
go easy here.
lightning round. The easy answer would be 72 to do the Europe tour, or like the early 60s to do the acid test and like where it all began, or even like 74 to do the Wall of Sound. But I think that my answer would be 1970, because I mean 5270 at Harper College, that the other one alone. That alone is enough for me to be 1970. But they also did so many killer Dark Star jams. They had I'm a Love Light Girl. They had some great Love Lights in 1970. Then there's Working Man's and American Beauty. So I feel like that's just like such a killer fucking year that I mean all of these answers are great. It's such a hard question, but I think 1970 would be my final answer. Final answer.
I agree with you because a lot of those May 1970 shows, they also have the acoustic sets too, right? So you get the best of
Yeah.
both worlds.
Yeah. And I would love to see one of those acoustic sets. Oh my God, I'd love to see any of it as someone who was born in a post-Jerry world. I would give anything to do any of it. But I mean, if I get to pick, then 1970, specifically 5-2.
Yeah, we invented time machines here on Attendance Bias. So that's the world we live
Hell
in
yeah.
when we're on this podcast. Also, we talked a
Hell
little bit
yeah.
about this off mic, but you are a native Long Islander, as am I. So I
Hmm.
wanted to ask, aside from the Nassau Coliseum, which I think would be most people's obvious answer, what is your favorite Long Island
Hmm.
music venue?
Well, Long Island has this incredible music scene that I feel isn't appreciated as much as it should be. There are so many incredible bands here. There's such an amazing community here, from people from younger than me to people older than my grandfather. And we have a couple different places on Long Island that are, notorious to have these bands play. But I would say the first one would be the Paramount, which is in Huntington. They hold bigger bands. Like I saw Dark Star Orchestra there. I'm going to see Dweezil Zappa there in August. So that's definitely a fun one. But then there's smaller ones like the Warehouse in Amityville, where my friend Dan and Mitch, they have a band called Ridiculous, and they play there. And there's a lot of good Grateful Dead bands there. There's Half Step. Like it's such a good community. Honestly, anywhere that you walk by and you see someone in a tie-dye shirt, you know you're at the right place. So it's just such a good community there. And there's so many little hidden gems all along. You just got to look for it.
Yeah, Long Island is heavy Deadhead community, always has been. I think one of the books I read called it fertile Deadhead territory.
I love that. Yeah.
Since I brought up the Nassau Coliseum, I used to love, when I was growing up, I loved going there for Islanders games. Even though I'm not an Islanders fan, I've seen some of the best concerts of my life there. But in more recent years, since I've become much more spoiled with being closer to Madison Square Garden and also seeing different venues around the country, when I came back to the Coliseum in 2019, when Fish played that fall 2019 show, I
Hmm.
realized I thought, in my opinion, it's got nothing going for it except for nostalgia. Do you agree or disagree? What is your read on the Nassau Coliseum as a structure?
As someone who doesn't have the nostalgia aspect, I'm a Ranger fan. So never really went over there, but I did go to that tour. I did go to was the two shows there? Or was it
It
one?
was just one,
That
yeah.
fall tour? Just the one? Yes, I went to that and that was awesome because it feels more homey. I liked that aspect of it. And from hearing different people, even on this podcast, and just telling me stories from their childhood of walking over or like being in Shakedown outside and all of those great stories, I think that it does have a great nostalgia factor to it. But as a whole, I think that MSG is just leaps and bounds. It's like a little baby MSG.
It is. It is a baby.
But yeah, I really enjoyed the show that I got to see there. But I didn't have a lot of other experiences with it. I mean, other than just partying outside the parking lot when I was 16 and not shouldn't have been there.
You're better off for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, finally, to wrap up the lightning round, the question everyone gets asked, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
So like this is another loaded question because what do you consider weird? That's sort of the thing, 'cause it's subjective. But I mean, it could be Bobby bringing spaghetti and my friend Bobby when he brought spaghetti into a show, or it could be at Bonnaroo when we watched Cardi B fans run away after they opened with Carini in what 2019, I think. The Cardi B fans went running because they opened with Carini. It was awesome. But I would say Hershey Park, 8/11/2021 was a sick show, first of all. They opened with You Sexy Wombat. Then it was awesome. Somehow I got on the rail. No one stopped me. I don't know how. After the first set was over, I turned to everyone. I was like, that was a great show. Oh my God, what a show. And I went to leave. I was going to leave at set break thinking that it was over. But after the show, we go out to the car and the Nitrous Mafia is out. There are so many tanks of nitrous all over and they're all around our car. So we hit the alarm button and they scatter like roaches all off our car. So they're freaking running all over the place. So we get to the car, we're trying to unwind after the incredible show, and this gang of bicycle cops come up to us and come up to the car and they're looking for the Nitrous Mafia. So bicycle cops, like 20 of them, roll deep into this whole lot and they start one by one tackling people in the Nitrous Mafia and taking them out one by one. So we're just sitting there like, what the fuck is happening, man? Like these cops are in shorts. Like it's just ridiculous. And then after they take those guys away, out of underneath the car, another tank rolls out with a guy and he just starts selling. He was hiding underneath the car. Like, it was the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life.
When was this show played?
So even before the Sphere began construction, it was announced in 2018. It seemed destined that Phish would play there for a million different reasons, but mostly wishful thinking, I think, when it was announced. But if you ask Phish heads, definitely they're going to play there. It's just a matter of time. And even when construction started in September of 2018, pictures of the venue in progress would start leaking through 2020 before construction halted for COVID. And then it went online after it was finished being constructed and external graphics were being displayed. It looked like a huge bowling ball to start. Like it was just in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, and it just looked like another thing there. At least I didn't have a sense of what it could do or what it would look like. And then once it started up, once it woke up, I could say, with funky light shows and the 3D emoji faces, Phish fans, at least online, really started cooking with ideas, questions, theories. Like, what would Chris Kuroda do? Would they play a whole residency? Would they have their whole band set up or not? And then things only got more intense as the venue opened. When U2 opened the venue in late September of 2023, I thought the production looked pretty impressive. What did you think when you started seeing some of the U2 still photographs and video clips?
I mean, it was definitely something I'd never seen before, and it definitely got us all cooking and thinking. And would CK5, would he have the rig? What's gonna happen about the rig? I remember that being the biggest thing. It's like, hey, who gives a fuck about the rig? Look at this. Like, this is insane. Like, but I feel like U2 used it to the extent that they could. Like they used it as much as the music would allow them to, but we knew that Phish's minds all put together and their music put together could have made the most incredible and did make the most incredible experience ever.
Absolutely, because you're talking about two different bands with two completely different mindsets and just almost in different worlds. But yeah, to your point, the big thing was, would there be a light show? Would there be a Chris Kuroda
Mhm.
light show? I guess I should say. And philosophically, how could the pre-programmed LED effects keep pace with Fish's improvisational jamming style? Are they going to jam? Was a question that seems
Mhm.
very silly in retrospect, but at the time, considering what the sphere was promoting itself as and what Fish's nature is, it seemed like a legit question. You know, how many shows could they
Mhm.
possibly play with different experiences? Would it be the same set each night? Like, to put it simply, how would they make it their own? Because the venue seems based on
Mhm.
predetermined programming and lighting, and Fish is anything but pre-programmed. They're the complete opposite. When the shows were announced, my experience, and I'm going to be very thrilled to hear your experience because I haven't really spoken to
Mhm.
anyone who experienced the shows. I wasn't that interested in attending them. And it's nothing about Fish or the venue. It's more about me. But the ticket situation was a shit show in terms of the jacked up prices and supply and demand. The venue did seem kind of intimidating. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but in this on this podcast ever, but I am epileptic and it did give me heebie-jeebies when I saw videos of it. It seemed intimidating in that way. It seemed very steep, the incline, and I'm not big of a fan of Las Vegas in general. So I was thrilled for the people who were excited to go and they had the best time. And I checked the set lists the next day, but for the most part, I was on the outside looking in. Plus, it was a West Coast show, so I couldn't do webcasts because I'm asleep before they even begin. So, Katie, let me ask you, what was your experience like between the shows being announced, when you decided to go, and then just why you have attendance bias toward it?
I kind of decided last minute to go to the Sphere. So I wasn't planning on going. I am finishing my master's degree. I'm working 70 hours a week. I had no time. I also have vertigo. So, and anxiety surrounding fish shows in general. So I was like, this sounds like hell for me too. And I've never been to Las Vegas, and I'm always scared. I was like, if I go to Vegas, I'm gonna get married to an Elvis impersonator. I'm never gonna come back. It's gonna be a fucking shit show, right? So actually, this is true. Antelope Greg, R.I.P. He passed away. And I don't know what the fuck it was about him dying that made me go, I gotta go to the Sphere. I gotta go. It was Antelope Greg dying. This legend, this freaking fish legend. If you don't know who Antelope Greg is, look it up. He died, and that day I said, I have to fucking go to the Sphere. So my friend Matt, who's actually been on the podcast, love him to death. Shout out Matt Bush. He's gonna be listening. He been texting me saying, "Can you come? Come, like you should come." And I kept saying, "No, no, I can't. Not in the cards." And Antelope Greg died, and I said, "I'm fucking coming." And he was just about to sell the ticket that he got for me. So thank God I asked that day. It's literally a month before the shows start. And I just said, fuck it, I'm in. And Vegas was intimidating and scary. And I'm on thin ice with work already because I just missed work for Mexico and all the other shows that I went to. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy the ticket, take the ride, see what happens, see what the adventure is. And that's how I ended up booking Vegas. And if you don't know me, I'm so bad with directions and geography in general. So I didn't know how far it was. It's a far flight. I didn't realize that. So, but what was the other questions? It was
Well, before we get to
booking
any other
again.
before we get
Yeah.
to any other question, can we unpack just for a second, and I'm not a licensed psychologist or therapist, but what the news of Antelope Greg passing away, and for all the stories that I've heard and read about him, I will say the one time I did interact with him, he was the nicest guy in the world to me. In Bethel
Yeah.
in 2011, he was really, really sweet. So whatever anyone else's experiences are or were, I'm in his corner for a minute, at least for this conversation. But Katie, did you know him? Was there something about, can I live while I'm young? Is it a matter of take your shots while you
Yeah.
have it? Is that what it was?
I mean, I had interacted with him before. Definitely it wasn't close. I didn't know him like very well personally. I think it was just the fact that someone who was so prominent in our community, someone who everyone, if you asked them about him, they knew who he was. And I just felt that that notion in general, that he has this legacy that lives on, that he got to do all these incredible things. I said, God forbid I die tomorrow. I want to be able to have this incredible legacy, not like that kind of legacy, maybe like a much better, like nicer legacy, but that I was able to buy the ticket and take the ride. Can I live while I'm young? And just freaking do it, man. Like that's why I did Mexico too. Life's so fleeting. You never know what's gonna happen next. So you might as well just fucking do it. So that's why I did it. Thanks, Anna Lipcraig, RIP.
So the second question was, of all the shows that you've been to, why did you pick this one? Why do you have attendance bias? And also specifically this jam, we shortened it, or you shortened it to theme from the bottom into split open and melt. Why this one?
Okay, so let me start off by saying that this was Bicycle Day. So for those of you that know what that is, you know what mindset that we were all in. For those of you that don't, go look it up. Bicycle Day, it's a great read. So it's Bicycle Day, and I'm with Matt, who is so fun to see shows with because between the two of us together, we know like pretty much everybody around us at all times. It's like just you can always find someone that can smile at you, that you know their name, they're great introductions. So it's automatically great vibes, just the whole run of the Sphere. So this day we go up to our seats. It's like 200 second row and 200 section. It's 6 seats, like incredible. It's really not steep. You can see the whole stage, you can see the whole Sphere. It's so fun. So we're already off to a great start, and it's Bicycle Day. So we're off to a great start, and it's night 2. So keep in mind that last night we experienced the Sphere for the very first time with Fish. So we figured out last night, we got our bearings. We figured out what they were kind of capable of. Well, we really didn't know, but what we thought they were capable of. That was the night where they had the tweezer with the cars, and I threw up in my cup because I was so scared of the cars because it was too overwhelming. I threw up in my Sphere cup, and all my neighbors were like, "Wow, that was pretty impressive." So that's last night. So now it's night 2. So our anticipation is more about what's Fish going to do next, not what is the Sphere. It's what is Fish at the Sphere going to be. So we get up to our seats and we're going down the aisle. I recognize like 15 people. We're all hugging, kissing, like, oh, we're all in the same section. This is going to be freaking dope. And then we get there and none other than Peter and Cotter from Goose are sitting right next to us, me and Matt. So we're like, yo, no fucking way, what's up? So we're all hugging, saying hello. And it's a serendipitous moment when everyone in your section just so happens to be your friends. So that just sets you up for such a great show. And it's always such a good omen. And, that whole bopping around the venue thing, I was going to mention that whole thing that was like, oh, he's bopping around the venue. Such bullshit. Such fucking bullshit. What a freaking great show partner all of these people were. But that was why I chose this specific show, because the vibes were fucking phenomenal. And the reason that I chose these specific jams, we're probably going to get into as we talk about these specific jams.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor. If you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. All right. Well, let's do it. So before we get into these jams specifically, can you give a quick rundown of what it felt like during the set up to this point? So for those of you listening at home, this was the first set of April 19th, and the set list up to this point reads Free, The Moment Dance, Axela Part 2, Mercy, Bathtub Gin, and then it kicks into theme from the bottom and split open and melt. So how are things going for you during that first run of songs up to theme?
So the free opener, I feel like it's a great opener. Mike's bass sounded so good. Like I feel like Mike, he gets lost a lot in the mix. And in this venue, he sounded so good. He was dropping bombs during this. that you could just feel because the seats were haptic or whatever the fuck that means, but they were vibrating. So the seats were vibrating, which was freaking cool. So he sounded great. Then Trey's ripping in the end for the free. Then the MoMA dance. So as my story earlier was, I'm still chasing my black-eyed Katie, and I'm gonna be chasing it probably for the rest of my life. But every time they come in with the lyrics, I'm like, oh, the vocals. I'm like, oh, there goes my black-eyed Katie. But this was a really cool MoMA. It's pretty spaced out and jammed out. Paige sounds dope in this. He sounds awesome. The sound in the Sphere was incredible, but we'll get more into that. Then Auxilla Part 2 is one of my favorite songs to see live now because it's just so fun. And Peter's girlfriend went to the bathroom during this or went to get a beer or something. So I had an extra seat. So I had this extra room to dance for Auxilla, and I'm headbanging. It was so fucking fun. We had such a good time, and I'm a sucker for the "don't shine that thing in my face, man." I'm a sucker for that. So when Trey did that, I'm like, yeah, it's like the best. And it's one of my favorite Auxilla Part 2s that I've ever seen live, I think. And then it was Mercy, which was much needed in that spot.
Yeah,
I mean, it
Mercy's
gets
like
a
a
lot of
come
like
down
mixed
song, right?
reviews. Yeah, it gets mixed reviews, but I
Yeah.
feel like it was very needed in that spot because I was sweating balls. And we all just needed to take a fucking chill pill. So we sat down, watched the visuals for that one. And then the gin. The gin opens, if you listen back, the crowd roars in the beginning of the gin. It's because the visuals, like it was these little men and women on little tubes in a pool, and they all scattered out like immediately. So it's like the one big ball, and they turn into lots of different. It's hard to explain. You got to look it back. But there's these little people, and they're just scattered all over the screen, and it was crazy to watch because we've never seen anything like it before. So that's where that roars from. Then they kind of lost me a little bit in the middle of the gin. It was a little for me, but then towards the end, the latter half of the gin, it fucking rips. It rips so hard. It shreds so hard. I thought it was going to be the set closer. I genuinely thought it was going to be the set closer because of how sick they were playing and how many peaks they had during the end of that gen. So that was the most incredible start to the first set. I thought it was the end of the set. And that's when it brings us to the next two.
That would have been something incredible to be a 5-song first set. That's something you don't see that often
Yeah,
these days.
that would have been something. I would have been, I mean, but I'm glad that it wasn't because these next two songs were fucking awesome.
Well, yeah, when you mentioned earlier that people were like, you could hear it on the recording that people were reacting to what they were seeing and not necessarily hearing, right? That it was more about being there than it is about the music that you listen to after. I was wondering when you chose these show or this jam, these songs, is the Sphere experience the most attendance biasy experience possible? I thought it was Mexico. I thought it was Mexico because I don't think anything could really match up to the experience of being Mexico detached from the music. But I think we were all proven wrong this past year with the jams, like the Chalk Torture, that it doesn't matter if you were there or not.
Oh,
It's
wow.
the greatest.
Sick.
So, what do you think?
Sick.
Is the Sphere? Is it possible to appreciate the Sphere having not been there?
I think, see, so I got to go to both this year, so I understand like what you're saying is about Mexico, but I mean the Sphere for me, it definitely was a had to be there moment for most of the things, a lot of the things, but I never when I chose this, I didn't listen back yet. So
Okay.
listening back since has it's still the sound in the room is what is missing. It still sounds great. The mix is great, but what you're missing is the incredible sound in the Sphere. It's nothing that you can say or like try to record. It doesn't do any justice to it. It's so incredible. You hear things on different sides. They can place different band members anywhere in the room. So one second you hear Paige to your left, next second you hear Mike, then it just moves over. It's like literally like a sphere of sound. So that's the part that I don't think is translating as well. And also the visuals, I mean, you could see them on the live stream to an extent or whatever they did. I don't even know, but you could see them to an extent, but I really do think that it is sort of like an amusement park sort of situation, sort of like Mexico. But the difference between Sphere and Mexico that I saw was Mexico was a main course of doing wook shit with your friends and then a big side of fish. And then the Sphere was a main course of fish with a side of wook shit with your friends. So I think it's more music focused and more around the band than it was for Mexico. those are like the differences that I saw.
Yeah.
But both
That-
attendance bias, he's like fucking nuts.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense a lot. At the beginning of this theme from the bottom, I can hear lots of people's like, woo, and wow. I could hear people exclaiming at the beginning in the way you normally wouldn't hear at a show from, say, Great Woods or something. And I can't tell what for. So my first thought is this is almost like listening to a tape with a big ball jam on it, or a show that has a huge glow stick war, something fun and exciting in the moment that may not, to your point and my thought, translate as well on tape. And it's a pretty standard and good version of Theme from the Bottom through about 4 minutes, with Trey guitar soloing, Paige following his melodies on piano. And then around 5 minutes and 40 seconds, I'm reminded of what you said about Mike being extremely clear with the haptic seats, that Mike gets really melodic along with Trey and Paige. And through all this, I'm glad that Fishman is just holding it down.
Yeah, I mean, the woo in the beginning actually was a glow stick war, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
There
I
was
did
a
not
glow
know
stick
that.
war. Yeah, there was a glow stick war, and I know this because Matt took a video, and in the video you can take a still and see the exact moment that I got pelted in the face with the glow stick. And I'm making the silliest face. It hurt like a bitch. So that definitely was that. But most of the other things probably were the actual sphere. But the visuals were great. We were at the bottom of the ocean for this theme. So we're all standing on the bottom of the ocean looking up. And they had these weird like dummies floating in the air that were like almost looking like dead people. And that's why I chose these two, because it's bicycle day. Keep that in mind. It's bicycle day. Now we're at the bottom of the ocean and Theme's playing, and Theme can get a little scary by itself. So I'm fucking terrified at this point. But then the melodies you were talking about, it was Mike and Paige just like they were floating through the sphere. Like the sound was just floating back and forth, and you couldn't tell where it was coming from. And I'm looking right at the band, but I cannot tell where the fuck this music is coming from. It was the most incredible way that the sound is set up. So that was great. They like throw the sound from different audience sections. And one moment you hear Paige, then you hear Mike. And it was just such an exciting theme because of all of these things combined. It was a great, actually, musically theme, and it was scary. And then it was scary because the visuals, and it was awesome because the sound was just being played with so much. I feel like they were having so much fun during this, just throwing it around. I've noticed it more during this song than any other.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that they were having fun because you can hear it a bit. I even wrote in the notes, I wonder how aware they are of the LED lights while they're playing. Probably not much at all, I would guess, just because they're so locked in as they always are. You know, Trey's always doing the 1,000-yard stare, like looking above and beyond whoever he's looking at. But for the audience, it was incredible, I guess. And that around 8.5 minutes to 10 minutes, they settle into this groove that when I was listening, I thought it could come from anywhere in their playing timeline. It was not necessarily 2024. It wasn't 1999. It wasn't 1989. It felt like asynchronous fish. And then they moved toward type 2 when you said that it could be a little scary. I'm guessing this is the part that you were talking about because I couldn't tell at this point. I'm talking about the 10-minute mark. I couldn't tell that it began from Theme from the Bottom, that this could have come from any number of songs. And the way I described it was straight rhythm-based rock and roll with especially psychedelic Fishman's bass drum. That it's especially psychedelic and Fishman's bass drum is prominent on this recording, that it must have hit you right in the chest with a lot of fun melodic things going around on the top of your head, whereas your chest is doing the hard work of the thumping of the bass drum.
Definitely. It was 100% all of that. And they really had so much fun this whole night, I think. I remember one specific moment during the song that Trey actually looked up at the visuals and he was just smiling like an ass. He's just like smiling so big, like, yeah, look at this, look what I'm doing. And it was just the playing was so good, but it was push and pull. It was a lot of push and pull from your heart to what you're seeing to what you're hearing. And that also goes into the next song with the push and pull. It's a whole night.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. I listened back to this today on my commute home. After that big psychedelic wah 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 weird stuff, at 12 minutes, it comes back to Theme from the Bottom and closes out traditionally. And then they go into Split Open and Melt because I got to get over my 3.0/4.0 Split Open and Melt baggage. I don't love it. I love Split Open and Melt, but not in the last. And now it's bordering on like 15 years that I don't know how to feel about this song. It's past time. So I listened with as open a mind as I could, and it's a normal version, and the jam begins at about 3 minutes, 45 seconds, and it starts off very spacey and psychedelic. And I'm glad you keep bringing up Bicycle Day, because I thought that this is probably for the spinners and the fans who are I wrote somewhere else right now is the best way I could put it.
There's the first snort of the episode. So definitely. I mean, it starts, and I feel like this song and maybe Maze were songs that we as fans were moving in our head of the possibilities of the actual visuals of these songs. We're like, oh, well, Maze and Split Open and Melt can probably go freaking nuts with these visuals because of the nature of the songs. So we really like cool ideas to speculate, but actually they didn't go crazy with this. They just put the four members up on the screen and they broke them out into different pieces throughout the night. So like throughout the show. So they're showing little pieces of each one of them. So it was trippy, but it wasn't taking away from the music and it wasn't as immersive as the other ones were. So you really get to tune in and to focus on the music that was there. I remember turning to everyone around me and saying, man, I really hope they go evil with it. And then I remember going, oh, I fucking wish I didn't say that.
Yeah, they sure heard you. I thought it was funny because when I was listening, when I'm in person, this is very, I don't know, I consider this ironic as a big fan that I find this kind of jamming. I'm talking about the 7 to 8 minute part where it's the part we're talking about where it gets real out there, real strange. And it's almost like these videos of the band, the real time feeds on the wall is the grounded stuff. Because the music is so out there that psychedelic visuals would just push us straight over the edge of the cliff. I find that stuff kind of hard to swallow in person, the music, I mean, but I really like the soundscapes when I'm listening, when I'm doing something else. Today, when I was driving home, and I was stuck in a little bit of traffic. I was glad I was
Mhm.
listening to this because it's more fun for me. I'm able to just kind of zone with it. When I'm there, I'm kind of looking and waiting for the next thing. I need something to grab onto,
Mm.
and this Would Open and Melt was not something to grab onto. It's very loose. It's like a giant planetarium.
Wow, how does that work?
Who would
No,
have
I mean,
thought?
I feel the opposite. I feel the complete opposite of you, though. I like the stuff in person, and listening back, I'll skip it. Like, I can't. It's the complete opposite. But in person, to me, it's just I like not knowing what's gonna happen, and I think that's what makes me love Fish so much because I don't like predictability. And the fact that I can't predict what the fuck is about to happen in the jam, let alone in this band's career, that's what I love about it. That's what I love about the Split Open and Meld. But that's also what scared the absolute shit out of me during the Split Open and Meld. I had to turn around and I looked away from the screen because I could not handle the music by itself. And we all looked at each other at the end, just with a big sigh of relief, like, we did it. We made it through.
Yeah, I would have been right there with
It's rough.
you. The best, I mean, I don't have a very large musical vocabulary, but at 8 minutes and 30 seconds, I described the music that I was hearing as loops and whoopity doos.
Yeah.
I'm not a music
Yeah,
theory expert, but I think that's the best I could do.
you can't explain it in music theory? Come on.
Yeah, I told you they're loops and whoopity doos. But beneath the loops
Perfect.
and whoopity doos, Fishman was playing some of the craziest jazz drum fills ever, as he tends to do during these crazy
Mhm.
spacey jams. And I couldn't quite tell where Gordon was. That, to your point, that Mike sometimes gets lost in the mix. I know inside the venue,
Mhm.
you said it was very clear and very precise, but I use audience recordings for this podcast, and for some reason, they're not as strong as some other venues, and I just couldn't hear where Gordon was. And then by 10 minutes, they're breaking down to almost nothing but bubbly sound effects. It sounded like, I don't know, like a 1920s modernist German film where things are breaking down and like mechanics are failing. So, what was it at the
Yeah.
end? Were you coming back to yourself or were you completely in outer space?
I mean, I definitely think that with the point with Mike's noise, with Mike's sound, it was more you could feel it more than you could hear it. Like you could feel Mike when he dropped bombs. You could feel his like actual presence more than you could hear it. So it's still a mess in the mix. They still have to fix that. So that's that. But yeah, that bubbly, weird, noisy part of it was when I think I just surrendered to the flow. Haha. And I just was like, you know what, at this point, Fish, take me wherever the fuck you're gonna take me. Just bring me back home. Like, just bring me home. That's all I was waiting for. I was waiting for that tension release of finally dropping back into it. Like, please, we're all begging. We need to get home. We're scared. And then
And
they
they do
did.
just that. They do
brought us
that at
home.
about 14 minutes, 14 and a half minutes. Paige is the one that you could hear start playing Split Open and Melt. Trey latches onto him and starts playing more rhythm, the chord back and forth for Split Open and Melt. And they finish it up with huge cheers at the end of this sequence.
Mm-hmm. It was fucking awesome. I mean, we literally all felt like we got through war. Like we feel like we did it. We got off the roller coaster. We made it through. No one threw up. No one passed out that I know of around me. And we made it through. But I thought it was interesting that Paige was the one that brought it back in too, because I felt like Paige took a lead this entire night of leading certain things, because in Gin, Trey came in too early and he started laughing at himself that he came in too early, and Paige was the one that brought him back to where he needed to go. So I felt that it was interesting that Paige kind of was like the ringleader of this night in general. But I think that once it was over, it was the big giant cheer, because those of us that were participating in Bicycle Day, we fucking made it. And those of us that weren't, were like, oh, thank God that crazy shit's over. But it was awesome. I think we all, after there, we all like, okay, everyone, we need a break. We need to go get some beer, and we need to regroup for set 2, because that was just one set somehow.
Well, Katie, the Phunky Witch, thank you so much for joining me today, for coming on to Attendance Bias and telling everyone who's listening about Theme from the Bottom into Split Open and Melt from April 19th, 2024 at The Sphere in Las Vegas. But not just that, little chatter about Long Island, a little chatter about Madison Square Garden, and everything in between. Really appreciate you finding the time. Thanks again for being a guest on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast, and I'm look forward to do it again soon.
And that's it for today's conversation with Katie. And we do have a very short attendance bias fact check to keep us on the up and up today.
Attendance bias fact check.
For the record, the last time that Phish played Black Eyed Katie was on December 30th, 1997 at Madison Square Garden, nearly 20 years before Katie's first show at the same venue. And Phish did not play the Moment Dance, the song which Black Eyed Katie became, at Katie's first show. The first Phish song that Katie enjoyed, Harry Hood, from New Year's Eve 1993 at the Worcester Centrum, is an outstanding version. It is described on the Phish.net jam charts as, quote, delicate soloing which builds into a frenzied guitar-led jam, end quote. Highly recommended listening for any Phish fan. The book that described Long Island as, quote, fertile deadhead territory is A Long Strange Trip by Dennis McNally. Overall, it's the best book about the Grateful Dead that I've ever read, and if you're into discovering the history and context of the Grateful Dead, definitely dive into it. Katie calls out her friend Matt Bush several times over the course of today's episode. Matt, who has had several jobs in the Grateful Dead and the larger jam band world, was a guest on this podcast where we discussed several shows in his experience, both Phish and Grateful Dead related. As of today's recording, his episode is the most listened to episode of Attendance Bias ever. It was released on March 9th, 2022. And finally, it's a recurring motif in Katie's experience that April 19th, the date of this show, is Bicycle Day. If you don't know what it is, summarized by NPR, quote, Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann first synthesized what became known as LSD in the 1930s. In 1943, he took what he thought was a mild dose and took a bike ride home. Quoting Albert Hofmann, I was taken to another world, another place, another time. My body seemed to be without sensation, lifeless, strange. End quote. So, if you want to celebrate Bicycle Day, you know what to do. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Katie, the Phunky Witch, for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode, and the Mockingbird Foundation for everything it does to help children's music education. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You can also follow Attendance Bias on social media. The most concrete way you can help Attendance Bias is by going to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias and donating anything you can to keep production going. Every penny helps. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.